I'm so glad to welcome you to this special Flourishing Fully podcast because today we have Stuart Tomc as our guest. I've never met anyone so enthusiastic about CBD oil as Stuart and so knowledgeable from so many different angles. He's a wealth of information about what it is, how it works, and what you can expect. Mr. Tomc has spent 20 years in the national products industry. He's been a global nutrition educator. His career at North American Herb and Spice and then Nordic Naturals prepared him well for his involvement at Canavest and CV Sciences in the cannabinoid arena. It is his passion to educate consumers on the enormous nutritional and health benefits of hemp-derived CBD oil. He is an author, The Essential Debate, which is a review of omegas, and he's made over 4,000 radio appearances and is a remarkable source for health-related topics, particularly in relationship to the cannabinoid system. He is cutting edge on cannabinoid science. So we're so happy and lucky to have you on the program today, Mr. Tomc.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for the warm introduction. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you, and I want to thank you. I had a chance to take a look at the book that you put together on phytocannabinoids, and I just want to salute you taking a step, if you will, into the unknown to bring this relatively new compound, although it's not new in terms of history, it's new in the marketplace, to people that really need it. So my hat is also off to you, Doctor.
Thank you. In simple words, can you tell our audience what is the endocannabinoid system?
I think the best way to explain what the endocannabinoid system is to use this very simple term called the master control system, which is an oversimplified term, but it does get the point across. We didn't discover the endocannabinoid system until 1992. Which means that before that, we didn't even know there was such a thing called the master control system that really oversees 4 distinct areas. And the endocannabinoid system regulates how we eat, how we sleep, how we protect, including the immune system, and then I think most importantly, how we actually forget, the ability to edit or to forget information that may be inaccurate or harmful. So eat, sleep, protect, and forget. The endocannabinoid system is the master control system that oversees our nervous system health, our metabolic health, our stress resilience, recovery and adaptation in sports, supporting our immune system, and our gastrointestinal and digestive health. That's probably the most succinct explanation I can give.
That's wonderful. The way I think about it as a master control system, that it affects the hormones. Where are you including the hormones under there, the hormonal system?
Oh no, absolutely, it has to. When I'm sort of starting out with the broad brushes, if you will, you make an excellent point, because you've got all of the hormonal systems that are what we're learning, because this is brand new, that so much of this is being augmented and or in a more nuanced way being affected by endocannabinoid tone. And so that's where I think we have the most exciting opportunity to share with our audience, Doctor, is that we're still learning how interconnected the endocannabinoid system is. I look at the work of Vincenzo Di Marzo, and he wrote a book called The Endocannabinoid Ohm. Have you had a chance to take a look at that one yet, Doctor?
I have, and it's not for the faint-hearted.
Yes, this is a very hard book to read, but it's the most important book so far that we have. And one of the quotes from the endocannabinoid ohm from the authors, Dr. Vincenzo Di Marzo and Dr. Jenny Wang, they really beautifully, eloquently put it. They say the endocannabinoid system is one of the most pleiotropic signaling systems in vertebrates, being involved in all aspects of mammalian physiology and pathology. So to your question, when we look at the cardiometabolic benefits of augmenting the endocannabinoid system with things like CBD, one of the areas that we see a direct connection is the management of central obesity via adipokine and myokine profiles. And so that's the tie-in there, if you will, is quite fascinating. But the real message that I want to share is we can learn this stuff together in real time. And that, I think, makes it more exciting than anything we've studied.
It is very exciting, and people will ask me, and I'm going to put it to you to get your slant, is if this is such an important system, why haven't I heard about it?
Well, I asked that same question to a young physician. Now, he's not quite a doctor yet, but he's at UCLA, and they have a CBD research program. His name is Dr. Chen. He tells me I'm not a doctor yet, but he's in both the MBA and MD program at the same time. I love these overachievers, and he looks like he's about 16 as well. So he's quite a nice young man. And I asked him last time he was here, I said, Dr. Chen, you're at UCLA right now. You're a young person becoming a medical doctor. Have any of your doctors at all, and mind you, he runs a little CBD research program at UCLA that he started. I said, have any of the doctors, have any of your professors, has anyone mentioned the ECS or endocannabinoid system at all? And there's nothing but crickets. And I even asked him, did they even mention the failed FDA attempt to harness the endocannabinoid system with the drug rimonabant, also known as Acomplia, which was a complete failure. It was an inverse CB1 agonist. It was supposed to be the anti-munchie pill. And yeah, you were in your skinny jeans in 6 weeks, but the side effects included, major depression and death. And so they decided that that wasn't going to be a good way to help people lose weight. They didn't even mention to Dr. Chen in his training in medical school that they even attempted to harness the endocannabinoid system with an FDA-approved drug that failed. So to your point, this is still in almost complete obscurity to most people.
Right. Well, two things that come to my mind is that the researchers or the pharmaceutical companies that try and isolate a single compound are probably doomed to failure, since it's the rich blend, the entourage effect, that creates the marvelous healing properties of the plant. Don't you agree? Or what's your take?
Well, I have had that debate, Doctor, with many people, and mostly with myself, is who I debate the most with, because not having the privilege, and it's really a privilege to be a clinician, not having that privilege where you get different data. There's different data. The clinician's data is different than what academia tells the physician, because the physician sees the outcome. So I have been sort of, if you will, relegated to an area where if I'm a communicator but not a salesperson, I know I get excited, but I'm always educating and giving people evidence and letting them make decisions. That way I can say it as a journalist, if you will, science journalist. And so as a science journalist that's very interested in phytocannabinoids, and I'm the vice president of human nutrition for the largest CBD company that we know of in the world, so I better have an opinion on that. And as a long introduction to my take, and this is it, I understand the logic of saying it's the complex biochemical matrix of how the terpenes and terpenoids and all of the fatty acids and plant sterols and vitamin E and the 544 different compounds that are in there, the 104 different cannabinoids that have been identified, that they work together in concert in a way that we don't get results when we isolate a single moiety. I think the part of me that still has a fondness for the religion of nutrition certainly believes that for myself personally. However, as a journalist that is not a clinician and someone who's just looking at the data, Dr. Sally, it's really hard for us to argue against the results that GW Pharmaceuticals announced just recently. I mean, let's face it. They have the very first and only randomized control trial using CBD, and they were using 98% CBD with 0.2% THC and none of the fatty acids and very little of the plant sterols or the vitamin E, missing many of the cofactors. And so it's hard to argue with the fact that they showed stellar results, a 39% reduction in treatment-resistant epilepsy. 39% reduction, treatment-resistant epilepsy, failed surgery, Depakote, gabapentin, phenobarbital, the list goes on, compared to placebo, where they saw, I believe, an 11% reduction. Now, if you compare those outcomes to the trials that were done to bring statin drugs to the market, this may be, on a quantitative basis, one of, if not the most effective modalities we've seen in a long time, if not ever. So my point is this. Yes, I believe in the total plant complex and the complexity of the plant and what nature has to offer. At the same time, these cannabinoids are so effective that even when they isolate them in huge concentrations, they're getting results that are stupefying. And in summary, it would be unfair intellectually for us to argue that our products would somehow be materially equally as good or somehow superior if we haven't been able to recreate that same kind of science. That's just my take on it.
I haven't seen that study, but it raises an interesting point that if they have a single isolate, as you describe it, how much more effect it would be using more the combination.
But that's why I love doctors like you. That's why I love it, because you're allowed to make that inference, to make that jump, I believe, in a different way than a layperson. So I think you're really onto something. And we're going to say, here's what we're seeing from this is the non-marketing side of me. This is just reporting data. And I've got a little, my job is to help promote. So we're getting feedback from doctors across the nation, one in particular. I think I also had introduced you to or mentioned the work of John Hicks,
Yes.
right? I think you got to meet him.
No, I haven't met him, but I look forward to it.
At some point, you two are going to really hit it off. Well, he had 30 years, like integrative medicine, like and out there, but you would never be able to tell. Red tie, blue coat, silver hair. I mean, he looks like a senator. What's so interesting about him is he has no interest, according to him, in cannabis. He had no dog in the race, if you will, or in the fight. So he wasn't interested in anything other than what works. Well, he's practicing medicine in Los Gatos, California. He's seeing Skype patients from all around the country. He's so busy, it's hard to get in to see him. And he's basically told me that using our spray, even our plus CBD oil spray, lower concentration, he is consistently getting results at a fraction of the dosage that we saw used by the pharmaceutical companies. So if that is an indication that the complex biochemical matrix and the total plant complex, and you can't beat Mother Nature, if that's any indication of that argument, it looks like we're both really onto something.
That's outstanding information. So I have a question that one of the listeners wrote in. What amount of CBD oil do you have to take to control pain?
This is where the entire relationship of the prescription and the intervention and the patient probably has to change if we're going to have a very honest conversation about how cannabinoids may or may not help people with pain. And then I'll get into the dosing things I've heard and the mechanisms of action. But it's the idea of take two, call me in the morning. And what do we hear of with painkillers all the time? All the bad news out there. We had this overprescription thing, then we tightened the noose, and then everybody went and bought street heroin. We all know the story, right? So the thing that's really interesting about this pain issue is that when you look at the history of people that have used cannabis, and we'll do this in real time so it makes more sense. So I'll just ask you a question, doctor. Historically, people that have used cannabis, just smoking it through a peace pipe or whatever, just for pain or inflammation or whatever they were using it for, how did they know when they had enough? When people use cannabis as medicine, how do they know when they've had enough?
On a basis of feeling better. The pain was less, the seizures were less, whatever it would be, but we're talking about pain.
But you're the first doctor that I've talked to that answered that question in that way. Because the training is not, we got rid of the shaman. We got rid of the medicine woman, right? We did everything we could to tease that out of the system.
You're talking to someone trained in shamanism, so that maybe that's why I answered it the way I did.
Well, that's probably why you're attracted to this narrative. And the other day we had a webinar. We had a bunch of our brokers on for our little natural product channel, and they were frustrated. And one of the brokers said, we didn't know how much black cohosh you needed when we first started. We didn't know how much St. John's wort you needed when we first started. So it's really difficult, especially with pain, because pain is so elusive. And you go to these pain clinics, and you talk about shadow pain or silent pain or all the different ways that they have. It's more complicated than stuff I've studied, the whole pain narrative. And they're finding that you really can't control it as easily as we thought we could with opiates, and you take too many, and you know the story there. So here's what we have found. CBD appears to modulate the opioid receptors. And there may be what's called allosteric modulation of the mu opioid receptors, so that in the presence of the ligand, that you could actually reduce the amount of painkillers that are needed. Now, your body makes natural opiates, and then, of course, you've got the exogenous ones as well. But what we're finding is there are many docs that are reporting back to us that introducing CBD low and slow, they've been able to titrate down the amount of pain medication. So that's something that I have heard now at least 50 times. That's still considered not even class 3 evidence. That's considered a hearsay. So what I would recommend for people with pain is the dosing titration schedule that we have put together. Have you had a chance to take a look at that, Dr. Sally?
I have, but maybe you could tell the audience.
We did create a generic dosing titration schedule, which you can get from Dr. Sally, and you can just use it, and it doesn't say anything about pain, and it doesn't say anything about our company, and it is if you will, an adaptation of the dosing titration schedule that pharma is currently using with their cannabis-based products. So they've done a lot more homework than we have, obviously. So we've modified the dosing titration schedule. So here's the idea: it's a 14-day calendar, and you've got the number of milligrams of CBD in the morning between waking and midday, and then the number of milligrams of CBD in the evening between 4 p.m. and bedtime. And then in the right-hand column, you see the total milligrams of CBD per day. So on day 1, you're taking 3 milligrams. On day 2, you're taking 3 milligrams. Day 3, you're taking 6 milligrams. By day 5, you're up to 9 milligrams. And by day 6, you're at 12 milligrams. So you slowly titrate up. And this is what we learned from pharma. This is very good. It says right on the dosing titration schedule, if improvement in symptoms is not seen during this initial trial of therapy, treatment should be stopped. And I love that. So here's what we're finding. Most people, if they're just taking it for generalized anxiety or social anxiety disorder, or you take a little rescue remedy during the day, or you take your theanine or your GABA or your kava, a lot of us are living on these kind of things. Most people that are using those kind of products, and they're just using it for general balance and well-being, sleep, maybe a little inflammation, they're stopping at around 9 to 15 milligrams. So between 6 to 10 sprays. Now that's feedback, doctor, that I've got now from 600 different health food stores, making the dosing titration schedule available now to thousands of people. Again, below class 3 evidence, considered all basement anecdotal. But that's a good sign that most people are getting relief at under 15 milligrams of CBD. Have you noticed that at all, doctor?
I actually haven't, but I have my own theory, Stuart. As long as people are eating processed foods and food that is not organically grown, so they're exposed to the glyphosates and compounds in Roundup, those compounds actually stimulate the pain system. So if you can get people to change their diet, which this conversation is not about, but if you can get them to change their diet, I then see that the CBD oil kicks in.
Wow, God, that's fascinating. Well, that might explain some of the disparate dosing. And then that goes back to my initial conversation about the ivory tower of sending out information and prescriptions. And what do they, when we read the little thing in the bottle, it says, if side effects occur, discontinue use immediately. And that makes us feel like that there's a certain amount that if we go over that, there's going to be a problem. Well, cannabinoids are far, far different. If you look at the original research that was done, And you can watch the documentary. It's called The Scientist.
Great
The
film.
you watched it. It's on YouTube. The story of Raphael Mechoulam, and it says very clearly in the documentary the very first time the man that discovered cannabinoids gave them to his peers and colleagues, they all had different reactions.
Yes.
And so when you talk about shaman, what I'm insinuating these days more and more is we've got to find the responders. Now, we don't have SNP testing yet, and it would be great eventually to get some urine testing to show like who would be a responder to a cannabinoid therapy. However, I don't really think we have a lot of effective pre-screening tools for SSRIs now, do we? We don't really find out how the patients respond to those medications for the most part until they're on them. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So this has to be a very similar way. That's why we want to start low and start slow. Someone said the other day, well, why don't you stop complicating it, Stuart? This stuff is like coffee. And since I don't drink coffee, I guess I missed the analogy. He said, some mornings I need 1 cup. Some days I'm drinking 2 in the afternoon. You get to, you just know. And so let's go back to the historical use of cannabis. For 10,000 years, there was no prescription. It followed us. We followed it. Some say it's the first domesticated crop. Everywhere there's human civilization, we have found cannabis. And the people that have used it spiritually and the people that have used it responsibly to stay well, they knew they had enough when they knew they had enough. If you're at 50 or 100 milligrams, 250 milligrams of CBD, and you're in pain and you're not getting any relief, then it's probably a good indication that the CBD and the endocannabinoid system won't help with your particular type of pain.
Yes. That's very important. That's common sense, no?
I think so, but the conversation, we need people like you and others out there saying, hey, well, guess what? There may actually be a relationship the patient builds with the compound, with themselves, and with the doctor. It is endocrinology in a far more nuanced way. I always go back to my own little type 2 hypothyroidism issue. For years, I'd go in and they would test my thyroid and tell me, you're taking too much of that stuff. I was taking 2 grains of Armour thyroid a day. You're taking too much of that stuff. Take less of it. I would take less of it. I didn't think the same way. I would get horribly constipated. My hands would get freezing cold. I'm not alone in this. You probably have had tons of.
Yes.
I finally got to the place where I looked at this one doctor and I said, is it possible, sir, that I would know how I feel more than you could or more than how that paper is lying to both of us right now? And you know what? He looked at me and said, hey, thank you for reminding me of that. I mean, really, it's a novel idea. It's common sense. But when you use CBD, here's the rule of thumb. Start low, start slow. Even if you're an experienced cannabis user, you never consume 250 milligrams of CBD at one time, or 100 milligrams of CBD, or 50 milligrams, or even 20 milligrams of CBD at one time with no to low THC. So take your time, start low, start slow, and you'll find your own perfect dosage.
Excellent advice. So, what about people with cancer? Do you feel that we need the THC for people with cancer? And what kind of, is that the same advice that you give? Start low, proceed slow?
Well, that's now we're opening up another chapter here. I think it's pretty. It's too new for us to tell for sure. Some of the papers are making it very clear that CBD may have its own ability to impede tumor genesis. If you look at the proposed mechanisms of action, CBD in and of itself is anti-proliferative, and it can upregulate calcium ion channels and upregulate reactive oxygen species. It can positively allosterically modulate the CB2 receptor, has some interesting effects. And the THC also has a known, pro-apoptotic power to it. And when you talk to the people that are married to an ideology, when you talk to the pro-cannabis people, they'll tell you, you have to have THC. If it doesn't have THC, it won't work. Wait a minute. Earlier on, we were talking about the first randomized control trial on CBD ever. with 98% CBD and 0.02% THC that showed a 39% reduction in treatment-resistant epilepsy. Don't tell me it has to have 20% THC in there to work, because there's no data to support that. So that you're just making that up. Now, there are anecdotal stories of people using a combination of THC and CBD for cancer online, anecdotal stories that are quite compelling. And what I would suggest that people do is to do a tremendous amount of homework, read everything you can at pubmed.gov, talk to somebody like a Dr. Sally or a Dr. Hicks, and over time, all of the doctors will get to know each other, and at places like A4M at the Anti-Aging Conference or the Scripps events, there'll be all kinds of workshops, and people will share information, and eventually we'll get a better prescription. In the meantime, however, if you were suffering with cancer and you wanted to use cannabinoid therapy, that's where the start low and start slow may only be just for the initial exposure, right? Just the first few days. Mm-hmm. Because what we've heard is you need at least 1 gram a day of total paste. So let's say we make those 10-gram applicators, there'd be 10 doses in there. I'm not saying that our product should be used for that. I'm saying that the folklore is 1 gram a day, every day for 60 days. Did you get a chance to see the YouTube documentary called Run from the Cure, Dr. Sally?
Run from the Cure. Is that a Ty Bollinger piece?
No, this is the story of Rick Simpson.
Oh, Rick Simpson. I don't know if I've seen that video, but I'm familiar with Rick Simpson's work very well.
Yeah, if you get a chance, and everybody that wants to, that's curious about cancer, if you watch Run from the Cure, you're going to be struck with, or I was struck with, it was a difficult thing for me to watch, because it's the thing that we're not allowed to talk about in nutrition, and it's the thing that everybody wants to get some handle on somehow. So I knew in watching the documentary that it would be sending a message to a lot of people that they may be able to take health matters into their own hands. And I just don't want anyone to misconstrue that CV Sciences is telling you to do that. I'm just letting you know that there's information out there that's available. And I've heard some extraordinary cases of people combining not only cannabinoid therapy, but doing a myriad of other things. The ketogenic diet, which is very popular right now, myriad of other things that people can do. And let's say you only get relief from like the idiopathic, inflammation that you don't know where it's coming from, or there's pain associated, or your sleep, you can't sleep properly, you're so anxious. When you mentioned the hormonal system earlier, right, we know that when we're in constant fear and flight, that we're mobilizing all this glucose and elevating cortisol, and the blood's moving from our heart and our brain to our hands and our feet so we can run. We know that's horrible for healing, right? That's not a good way to recover.
That's correct.
Even if CBD just helps to keep healthy people healthy, balances the endocannabinoid tone, it has a unique anxiolytic property, even that alone may have huge effect, long-term effect, on people's state of mind while they're even going through traditional cancer therapy. What do you think about that?
I'm on board with everything you said. We used to think that the nucleus of the cell was the control center, but now we know that the mitochondria, they rule. So cancer is now considered to be a mitochondrial deficiency disease. And one of the things that my research has shown is that the endocannabinoid system and the mitochondria are coupled. They facilitate each other. And frankly, in ways that, all these initials, mTOR, and there's a whole slew of new lingo for the way the mitochondria work, the way they signal.
The ECS and mTOR pathway, they're intimately connected.
And so, supporting the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, supports the mitochondria. And when you support the mitochondria, you reduce inflammation, you reduce pain, you reduce fatigue, you reduce reactive oxygen species, which people know of as free radicals, and that's the key to promoting health.
Now, the byproduct of that I was not expecting. Again, this is all anecdotal feedback, but what we saw, and I noticed in myself, I was using quite a bit of CBD earlier on, and a lot less now than when I first started, which I think is a good sign. We don't want to sort of create a new dependency for people. If we want to get healthy people healthy, we want to get them to a place where they can tell if they're out of order.
Can you
But
hold that thought? Because I just had a psychiatrist write me and say that cannabis is addictive. I'd like to know your opinion on cannabis in the form of hemp derived CBD, and perhaps you can throw in marijuana as well.
okay, so I agree wholeheartedly. Marijuana is addictive and may not be a friend to people that have psychiatric conditions. I can't find the paper at this exact second, but a paper was just published where they identified a genetic allele that if that sort of person is exposed to a lot of cannabis, they have a THC in particular, a much higher rate of major depressive disorders, and we know it can hasten schizophrenia and psychosis and so forth. So I agree with that 100%. This is not a blanket safe compound. When you look at the risk reward benefit in certain areas, let's say that you were going to look at just THC and pain and look at the risk reward benefit. If it does, according to anecdotal evidence, it might be able to replace some of the Oxycontin and morphine and so forth. And you look at the safety profile of opiates versus the safety profile of cannabinoids, no one can argue that the opiates are safer. No one can argue that because you will not die from the cannabis exposure, period. We haven't had that happen yet. So those are just facts. So when you're looking at risk reward benefit with medicine, I think that's a different analogy. But I am a huge fan of psychiatry. And one of the doctors that I'm working closely with is Scott Shannon, Shannon, MD. And the very first paper that we published, our first case report, is entitled Cannabidiol Oil for Decreasing Addictive Use of Marijuana, a Case Report. And according to the abstract, the patient was a 27-year-old male who presented with a long-standing diagnosis of bipolar disorder and a daily addiction to marijuana use. In the described intervention, the only change made to the patient's treatment was the addition of CBD oil, with the dosage gradually decreasing from 24 to 18 milligrams. See, those are doable doses. With the use of CBD oil, the patient reported being less anxious, as well as settling into a regular pattern of sleep. He also indicated that he had not used any marijuana since starting the CBD oil, with a decrease in dosage to 18 milligrams. The patient was able to maintain his non-use of marijuana. That's published. It's on pubmed.gov. It was published in IMCJ, Integrative Medicine, a clinician's journal. I just got an update from Dr. Shannon that we have more work that will be published soon online, PTSD, thought disorder. We've got 130 patients. We've just been given the green light to data mine to start looking at all those findings. So yes, THC by itself at 90% or 50% concentration, or what the kids are doing today, yeah, that may not be healthy, and it's certainly not natural. But when you look at the CBD with higher CBD and low to no THC, this is one of many case reports that are insinuating that you can use CBD to help people titrate down, not just from painkillers, not just from cannabis, but from stimulants like crystal meth and cocaine. So the idea that this stuff is all bad, I think it's oversimplified. Here's my analogy. A long time ago, we told people to eat fish. People that eat fish live longer. Okay, that's vague. Then we figured out what cod liver oil was, and Grandma said it cures all that ails you. Okay, that was vague. Till we realized that night blindness is what ailed you. It was vitamin A, like Albert. If it was rickets that ailed you, it's vitamin D, like David. If you need to antagonize too much arachidonic acid, it's eicosapentaenoic acid, known as EPA for short. And if you want synaptogenesis and brain cell to brain cell communication, if you want to learn new things, you need docosahexaenoic acid, known as DHA. We now can break the fish oil apart. This does that. Green tea, L-theanine, caffeine, epigallocatechin gallate. If you drink the green tea, you get all of them. If you take the theanine by itself, you don't have the antioxidants, but then again, you don't have the stimulant. All we're doing with the cannabis plant is deconstructing it. 540 compounds, 104 cannabinoids. It's figuring out which each compound does or doesn't do. That's the art of this. But I agree with the psychiatrist. THC for people that are not healthy. I'm talking, first of all, not for anyone under 30, in my opinion. And for someone who's not mentally healthy or stable, THC may not be a good prescription. CBD may be an excellent prescription.
Excellent. Do you consider that, a lot of people are familiar with vitamins. We take our vitamin D and our A and our, C, whatever it is that, your particular vitamin regimen. Do you consider that CBD is like a vitamin?
I'm getting close. It's been a conditionally essential nutrient for the responders. And a lot of people say to me, well, okay, if you don't have any tests to find out who's a responder, this is, again, anecdotal observation that we've made from reading many, many papers. And then, of course, I've had so much interaction. I shouldn't say so much. I've had more interaction with this compound and people than probably anybody alive. So when I see papers like this, here's one that came out in Neurotherapeutics. Preclinical evidence conclusively demonstrates CBD's efficacy in reducing anxiety behaviors relevant to multiple disorders. Wow, that's powerful. Does someone need to take that every day? No. But if you're dealing with anxiety, how many people have you seen? I've spent 30 years teaching people in health food stores. You'd think people that shop in health food stores, since it's all organic and it's all non-GMO, and that's the big push, whether they do it all or not, that's the big push, you would think people in health food stores are the happiest and healthiest, right, doctor?
Yes.
Yeah, wrong. Okay. I have a silly picture of Warren Buffett here in my office eating a popsicle that I haven't eaten since I was 9, since I don't eat that stuff, right? And it says, it's a quote from Warren Buffett that says, I don't see a lot of smiles on the faces of people at Whole Foods. He's got a point. That we've made such a big deal about I'm a vegan, I'm a paleo, that we've gotten so neurotic that talk about mental health meltdown. We're so far from balance. So to answer your question, is this a vitamin? If you sleep all night long, I mean restorative, proper sleep architecture, you wake up, you're ready to run a triathlon. You feel great. Stress comes your way, you're like Teflon Don. You just turtle wax, it just bounces all off you. You forgive everybody, you let everything go. You have regular bowel movements, you got perfect health in every way. Your endocannabinoid system is doing great. You don't need this stuff at all. Move on, find something else, do some yoga. I love that narrative. But for the people that are looking for help, and if you go into these health food stores or if you talk to clinicians or integrative doctors that really know their stuff the way that you do, how often are people walking in and saying, I'm not stressed out at all? Isn't it the first thing that they usually say to the doctor, Dr. Sally?
Sure, stress is huge.
So I would say I'm getting to the place where with probiotics, which I think is non-negotiable no matter what, with probiotics for the people that are responders, phytocannabinoids, CBD in particular, may end up being a conditionally essential nutrient.
Awesome. I think that really helps clarify it for a lot of people. What about the problem of urine testing? Can you talk a little bit about that? I have one young man who's working for NASA who is desperate to go on CBD oil, and he's just afraid about urine testing.
He should stay afraid until they get this thing fixed. We've written a couple of articles about it. There's no way around it. The simple, inexpensive tests, they just blanketly pick up all cannabinoids. Yeah, CBD, I mean, when you look at it next to THC, if you were going to look at the molecular structure, boy, are they similar. It's just one little tweak. So it's difficult. If you go in for a further screening, and then they take the little urine thing and they do a real assessment, then they can find out that it's CBD, but there's still that trace amount of THC that's in there. So depending on the statute, depending on the company, whether it's the government or whatever, I mean, we've got this like 0% THC euphorophobia just locked down here in puritanical America. As long, not like we got any emotion around that. As long as we're so euphorophobia, and no one could ever feel good no matter what, I'm being facetious. If your job requires that you not fail a drug test, avoid all of this stuff. Don't eat hemp seeds, hemp protein, hemp seed oil, none of it. And I saw a video the other day. I'll see if I can search it out and send it to you. It was this big to do. A couple of toxicology experts were showing how common household, pharmacy bought things could trigger a drug test positive. They showed how a Hershey's chocolate bar, I'm serious, tested positive for like cocaine. So if your job, if your job requires that you not fail a drug test, don't mess with this stuff. Now that being said, there's quite a bit of published literature that says the body burden is around 4 milligrams of THC for almost anybody to test positive. So if you were going to deal, let's say, with just the little tincture sprays, the 100 milligram, and I'm just pulling out my certificate of analysis right now, the 100 milligram product has 0.002% THC. So you'd have to drink about half the bottle every single day just to get close to testing positive. I just want to share that with people in case you make your own decision. Our official position is if your job requires you not failing a drug test, don't take CBD.
Right. Very important advice. I was just on the internet looking at Amazon and I typed in CBD oil, and Amazon gives you a book on CBD oil and hemp oils. So, can you clarify the difference for the audience on hemp oil and CBD oil?
Yes, I was hoping you were going to ask this question. Thank you very much. Well, when we brought our product to market, the Plus CBD oil product line, not one warning letter had been sent by the FDA. And we are operating under a legal opinion that we procured. And hemp is exempt from the Controlled Substance Act's definition of marijuana. Hence why hemp seeds and hemp seed oil exist in commerce today. Most people do not know that the Drug Enforcement Agency was taken to task. They were sued, and they lost. Yeah, David Bronner from David Bronner's Magic Soap and Hemp Industry Association. Eric seems. Do you remember all that?
Just 2014.
No, this went earlier. This was in the exact date is eluding me, but this is like in the late 90s or in the mid 90s. That's why they were going into health food stores and telling them that they couldn't carry hemp seeds. Now again, you're in the professional doctors world. I remember I spent a lot of time in the health food store world, and the proprietors of these stores were freaked out. They couldn't believe it. So David Bronner, with the resources of his company and their money, they give away a lot of money. They're amazing people. And the Hemp Industry Association, they sued the Drug Enforcement Agency and won. That can happen these days, right? And they won, and that's why we have hemp seeds and hemp seed oil. So here's what happened. When the heat started to come, when FDA started insinuating that CBD was not the first domesticated crop, hasn't been used since antiquity, was never in the U.S. pharmacopoeia, was never sold by pharmacies, cannabis extracts or hemp extracts. They were trying to make it seem like this was a brand new ingredient, there's no history whatsoever, and they're calling it a drug. And they're calling it a drug because it's the most effective thing they have found in a long time, if not ever. So let's get this right. They called it a drug that had no medical benefit until they were able to call it a drug that is more effective than almost anything they've ever found. It's pretty amazing when you can get away with that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So here's what happened. The other companies out there that saw these warning letters from FDA, the name of our product is Plus CBD oil. So unless we change the name of our product, it is what it is. It's CBD oil. Well, other companies out there that saw that the FDA was taking a position, instead of digging in and doing the right thing, the honorable thing, the just thing, the ethical thing, they've warmed out of it, and they're trying to be slick and sneaky. And if they just call it hemp, they'll never, ever, ever have a problem with the FDA or with GW Pharma or the power brokers of the world because they just flew under the radar. Here's the problem with just calling it hemp. You don't know how much CBD is in there. So guess what I've been doing, Doc? I've been buying all these hemp products, and I've been testing them. And people were getting ripped off before, and now they're really getting ripped off because you don't know how much is in there. Here's a test result in front of me. Here's a product that for $49.99 gives you 50 milligrams of CBD. $49.99, 50 milligrams of CBD. We sell 100 milligrams of CBD for 20 bucks. So calling it hemp is a cop-out because you're a chicken and you don't have the proper FDA, FTC regulatory compliance path, and you don't have a team of lawyers and a team of regulatory compliance experts, scientists and doctors at the ready for one of the biggest court cases in the history of nutrition. So they're charlatans, and if it's marked hemp and it doesn't tell you how much CBD is on there, do not buy those products. You don't know what you're getting, and they may be dangerous.
But isn't it true that the hemp products, hemp oil, for example, is from a different part of the plant?
You see the confusion. No, you nailed it. See, the seeds are where the nutrition comes from, if you will, in terms of the energy and the fatty acids, but the leaves are where the cannabinoids come from. So I've been a member of the American Herbal Product Association. I sit on our cannabis committee, and when all of this stuff first hit the market, Doc, everybody just wanted to just call it hemp oil. Why not? You wouldn't have any problems with FDA if you just call it hemp oil. Well, how do you think that made the hemp oil people feel? Manitoba Harvest and the Hemp Industry Association, all those, the people that sued the DEA and won to keep their products on the market. Now all these CBD people come in, and what they want to do is a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, brother, let's just call it hemp too, bro. It's okay, man. So we can fly under the radar. That's where CV Science is. That's where what I'm doing, what we're doing is different. We're going to go toe-to-toe. If the judge tells us to our face, no, the first domesticated plant doesn't belong to society, the British discovered it in a secret location in 2005, well, then I'll change my label. But that's not going to happen because we all know that that's a lie. And what I love more than anything that's happening in the last few years is with more access to information and more eyes on all the time, it's harder for whole-scale chicanery and power brokering to control markets. It's harder for people to get away with that than it's ever been before. And thank goodness they're trying to do it with hemp, because they're going to try to control something that the general public will not let them make a monopoly out of. It's an exciting time to be in the hemp business.
It is. It is. And I hope people really take that to heart, that that there are forces that want to remove this amazing plant from the public domain.
Oh, yeah, they do, because just think about this. If Epidiolex, which is the CBD product that's being made right now, if that gets approved as a drug, which we expect it to any day, technically, where does that put all the other products? That's an interesting thing. I also read the other day, and I have to fact check this. I'm always a fact checker. I read the other day that the FDA rejected their 50% THC, 50% CBD product because it didn't have enough compelling data. However, the CBD data is so compelling, and then you don't even have the euphorophobia Schedule 1 issue. So this is a very important conversation. If we want to continue to have the right to use hemp, agricultural hemp, ditchweed, remember? Everybody laughed at it. I used to drive by in the fields in Mississippi. My grandfather would say, there's the ditchweed. In the Army, we used to say, only a dope smokes rope. How can this invasive weed all of a sudden be a multi-trillion-dollar monopoly for one pharmaceutical interest? Don't let that happen. How do we prevent that from happening? By using hemp-derived CBD products, getting benefits, and sharing that information with others. That's how we keep the products in the market.
Well, not only that, but the domino effect. If you take away a plant like hemp-derived CBD oil, what about coconut oil? I mean, we have important MCT oil, caprylic acid. You know, next thing they'll do is tell you can't buy coconuts.
And I'm never an anti-pharma person. I mean, I intentionally try to stay absolutely open-minded. If I did what they do for a living, I would try to convince you that water is the cure for dehydration and that mine is the only one that you should buy. I mean, that's what pharma's job is. At the same time, they are proving with their randomized controlled trials that something is remarkable here, and we need to respect that.
Does taking CBD oil with another oil, like a coconut oil or a true olive oil, does that facilitate its use by the body?
Okay, we're switching from vegetable glycerin in all of our tinctures to extra virgin olive oil. There are a couple of papers that have come out talking about the role of extra virgin olive oil in modulating CB1 receptor. I mean, this is all new stuff. But from what we can tell, at least it's early enough, the extra virgin olive oil may be the best carrier so far that we have found. It gets really tricky with these oil carriers because there's some people that are arguing that we just want very little to no oils at all in our diet, right? I'm sure you've heard that whole argument too, and that gets to be a very complex argument.
Well, that argument is, I think, going the wayside with the evidence of the ketogenic diet supporting mitochondrial health.
Yeah, and you're the one, by the way, that turned me on to the mitochondria endocannabinoid connection. So thank you very much. That was a wonderful rabbit hole that you sent me down. I don't know enough about it yet, but thank you. It's really opened my eyes as well.
Remind me, I just found a great new article on it. I'll pass it along to you.
Thank you. Thank you.